Hello first year string players. This is a review of your last lesson, and this was an awesome lesson because we were able to take all of the skills we have learned since we started lessons and use them to play some really fun exercises. This week we looked at Lord of the Strings, the Tale of Three Opens. These are 6 short exercises, each with a fun title to match something in the story of the Lord of the Rings. And it's okay if you haven't read those books or seen those movies because you can see just through the character of the music how that matches the title. And we'll talk about a couple of those as we get there. All of the titles rhyme, which makes it a little bit more fun. We have Harvest Dance, Magic Pants, A Developing Romance, Military Advance, Lost in a Trance, and The Last Stance. And in class, we went through the first 5. We did not do line 6. You are welcome to do that as a challenge if you'd like, but we got through 5, and that's what I will expect you to know next time when you come for your lesson. Before we get into these, though, we had a new method for practicing that we used in our lesson and that I expect you to use at home. So up until this point, I have always said you need to say it before you play it. You can see those are written back here. Say it before you play it. But there is a new step in the middle. Since we know how to use the bow now, the first thing you do is say it. That's still the first important thing. The number one note reading tip is to make sure your eyes are on the music and you know what the notes are. So practice saying your notes first, because I would never expect you to be able to play it unless you know what the notes are. So number 1, still say it. 2, pluck it. After you say the notes, you're going to play pizzicato. And then 3, finally, play it with your bow. And make sure you have a beautiful bow hold while you're doing that. And we'll talk more about that later, okay? Let's take a look, starting at number 1, Harvest Dance. We're going to do this method as we go through. So we're going to start by saying it. Now you'll notice in your book, your notes are not colored, and that's okay. Remember I said sometimes they will be and sometimes they won't be. So this is a great challenge for you to make sure that you can read those 3 open strings without the colors. And most of us did a very, very good job with this. There are some symbols throughout this page that we are not going to talk about today. There was just too much to cover that we didn't get to everything this week. But the one that I do want you to look at is at the very end of exercise 1, Harvest Dance. It's at the end. There are 2 lines with 2 dots. That is called a repeat sign. That means to go back and do it again. So right now when we say it, we're doing step 1, say it. We're going to say all the notes and then repeat back and do it a second time. So here I go with number 1. A, D, D, rest. G, 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 D, D, rest. Repeat. A, D, D, rest. G, 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 D, D, rest. If that is challenging for you, pause the video and practice it again. Don't move on to step 2 until you can do step 1. You have to be able to do this first. Let me grab my instrument. Now I'm going to pluck it. Have my instrument up. Make your L for pizzicato. Put your index finger on wherever A is for your instrument. It's going to be different depending on what instrument you play. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. A, D, D. Rest. G, 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 D, D. Repeat. A, D, D, rest. G, 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 D, D, rest. Awesome. All right, once you have that down, pluck it. We move on to play it. We're going to make sure, of course, that when we use our bow, we have tightened it before we play. It should have been loose in the case. You're going to tighten it before you play. Put some rosin on. Remember, 5 swipes or so every time you play. We're going to make sure we have a beautiful bow hold. If you still are having a hard time with that, go back to the last video. The whole video last time was about how to have a beautiful bow hold. And we're going to make sure that when we play, we have our bow in the sweet spot. It's parallel to the bridge, not like this, not like this. And that we're moving our arm accordingly to get our bow hairs touching the string we're supposed to play. I had some kids who were kind of, as they played, going over every string. We have to be careful not to do that. It's 1 string at a time. So here's what it should sound like, and you are welcome at home to play it with me. Number 1, 1, 2, 3. Rest. Awesome. And we talked about in class that it's okay if you're struggling with keeping the bow on one string. You get better with that as you practice. We did those rainbows. We talked about those again in class where as I change and make contact with different strings with my bow, my arm might go up or down. Or if you're playing cello or bass, it looks a little bit more like this. It goes forward and backwards. And we talked about opening up our elbow when we use our bow. We're not playing from our shoulder. We're opening up our elbow. So all of those things will help you as you work through this. Let's go to number 2, magic pants. This is a fun one. We have eighth notes here, so they're faster. So when we say our notes, we're going to say them faster. And some of the measures with rest, we have what's called a whole rest, and we discussed this in class as well. A whole rest is when you rest for 4 beats. It's a different way of writing 4 beats of rest rather than writing 4 1-beat rests out. So let's go through and read our notes. Here we go. A, 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 A. A, 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 A. A, 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 D. At the end, they are quarter notes, so they are slower. We say them slower, right, to match the rhythm that they are supposed to be. And don't miss the D at the end. They're all A's except for the last note. All right, step 2, let's pluck it. Ready, and here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, next step, bow it, play it with the bow. When we do these eighth notes, they are faster. We want to do them in the middle of our bow. We don't want to be down here. This will be scratchy and crunchy. I demonstrated that in class. I won't do it on the video because I don't want to hurt anyone's ears. But we want to be in the middle of the bow. So checking to make sure I'm in the sweet spot, that I'm on the A string. This is great practice for staying on the A string because every note is A except the last note. So here we go. Ready, and here we go. Excellent job. Number 3, a developing romance. This exercise has half notes in it. 2-beat notes. They look like quarter notes, but they are hollow in the center. They're not filled in. And it also has what are called half rests. You can see the difference between the half rest and the whole rest. The whole rest sits under a line. The half rest sits on top of a line. And a half rest is just a 2-beat rest, just like how a half note is a 2-beat note. When we read our half notes, we are going to hold them out, stretch them out for 2 beats. G. When we pluck our half notes, we're going to stretch them out for 2 beats. 1, 2. It's not 2 plucks, it's 1 pluck that lasts for 2 beats. When we play with our bow, we're going to stretch it out and hold it for 2 beats. 1, 2. So it's not 2 motions, it's 1 long motion. Okay? Let's go through and read number 3. Here we go. G, G, D, rest, rest. A, D, rest, rest. D, D, G, rest, rest. Wonderful, excellent. I'm going to skip step 2 for the video just to save time. You should pause right now and play number 3 with step 2. Okay? Hopefully you're back. You actually paused the video. If you didn't, really pause the video right now and go do it. I really want you to get in the habit of doing this at home, but this is good practice for you to do independently too, to work on it on your own. Okay, so we're moving on to step 3. Play it with the bow. Nice long full bows. You got to open up that elbow, right, to get the long bows. And to stay in the sweet spot, you don't want to go like this and get out of the sweet spot. It's something that takes some practice, so be patient with yourself, but many students were doing very, very well with this week. So number 3, starting on G. 1, 2, here we go. right, great job, guys. We're moving along here to number 4, military advance. I told you some of these you can really tell by the title and the music that they match up. And this is one of those. This is actually one of my favorite ones of the page because it sounds like marching. So you get that military feel because as you're playing, it sounds like you are marching. There is a repeat at the end of this. We are going to, again, for time, just skip the repeat, but at home you can practice it with the repeat. Let's go through and do this say it, step 1, together. Here we go. G, rest. G, rest. G, rest. G, rest. D, rest. D, rest. D, rest. D, rest. A, rest. A, rest. A, rest. A, rest. Excellent. I'm going to skip step 2 again. That doesn't mean you should skip it. Pause the video and do step 2 at home. All right, now that you've paused the video, you did step 2, let's play number 4, military advance together. When you rest, you have to stop your bow. Stop. 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 It's very important that you do that. Don't lift your bow off the strings, right? Keep your bow on the string, but stop it, okay? So number 4. 1, 2, here we go. Now D. Awesome. Nice job, guys. Very good. We're going to move on to number 5. By the way, there are all sorts of other things. Remember, I said we didn't talk about some of these symbols, things called dynamics that we can go back and add later to make them sound even more dramatic. This one, for example, number 4, starts really, really soft and gradually gets louder as you go along. But that's something for not our 5th lesson, maybe a little bit later after we work on these things, okay? So we're going to end today with number 5. Remember, we skipped 6 just for time. We ran out of time, and we will do that later. We have a chance to. But we also, in some lessons, did not get to cover 5, and I promised I would go through it a little bit more in depth, so I will do the 3 steps for number 5 since some lesson groups did not get to go over number 5. Number 5 has whole notes in it. Whole notes are 4-beat notes. You hold them out for the whole measure. So when we say them, we're going to stretch them out for 4 beats, like the half notes, but they're twice as long. When we pluck them, we're going to hold that pizzicato note for 4 beats, and with the bow, we're going to do nice, long, full bows. This should be very similar to last week when I asked you to practice full bows on every string, except this time you actually are counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's read our notes. We're going to sound a little bit silly, but that's okay. I thought I messed up my steps, but it isn't. Say it first. We have to say it. Here we go. A, D, G, G, D, A. Okay? Don't worry about feeling silly. I just did it here. I felt a little silly. There were some people walking by outside. That is okay. Do it at your house, nice and loud and proud. And of course, when we do it in lessons, we are all together. So we can all look silly together. Let's do this one pizzicato. Number 5, lost in a trance. Here we go. We're on step 2. Pluck it. 1, 2, here we go. A. Awesome. All right, last step, play it with our bow. Keeping that bow in the sweet spot. This is going to be the hardest one for keeping your bow in the sweet spot, so make sure you're really, really watching that. Check for your beautiful bow hold, starting on the A string. 1, 2, here we go. So that's your homework this week, those 5 exercises. Of course, we are still working on to make sure we have a beautiful bow hold and on our note reading and on all of the things we have learned so far this year. So if there's something you're still struggling with, take the time to learn how to do it now. Where we ended with most students at the end of the lesson was that they couldn't play this perfectly yet, which is okay. If you're ending the lesson and can play it perfectly, then there's not really anything for you to work on during the week, right? So most students said, I can't play this perfectly yet, but I am confident that if I practice, I will be able to do it better next week. And we talked about that. Practice entails actually taking the instrument out of the case, not just putting your music under the pillow and having it seep into your brain. We sometimes joke about that in class, but that practice really means that for 3 or 4 times this week, you are going to take your instrument out and you're going to play along. And you know what, by doing this today, by watching the video, and hopefully you were playing along with me at home, you already got some practice time in this week. So great job. I hope everyone has a great week. I'm going to see you in your next lesson.